Hello everybody out there, my name's Garrett and you're watching 11 Bang Bang, and I just did a video the other day on the top 6 myths of the Springfield trapdoor rifle that I find on YouTube, and in those top 6 myths, on one of the myths I was talking about how people thought that the rifle was inaccurate and underpowered, and that is because they were using smokeless cowboy loads that did not have the right diameter of bullet the original Springfield trapdoor rifle would have fired. It had a slightly larger diameter bore, and so modern ammunition doesn't fit in those very well. So in this conversation I started talking briefly, just mentioned the 4580-500, which is a government designated cartridge, and many people didn't know about that, and I got a lot of feedback of people asking me to delve further into that, and some people even asking me, can we load that today? And the answer is it's probably very difficult. I haven't tried it, but modern brass doesn't hold quite as much powder as old brass. Even though you can compact it, I'm sure you could use a compression die and get it in there. Why did this cartridge exist in the first place? Well, it's because of the 1879 Creedmoor matches, and the long and short of it is the Springfield rifle up until 1879 was continuously trounced in the long-range competition by the Martini-Henry. Now the Martini-Henry fired the 577-450. Now the Martini-Henry fires a huge bullet with an 80-plus grain charge behind it, and I'm not an expert on the Martini-Henry rifles or their cartridges. I just know that it was a real stomper at long range and constantly beat out the Springfield rifle with its 405 grain bullet and its 70 grains of black powder. So in 1879, once they had been beaten, the government actually really kind of took an embarrassing look at this and were like, we might be falling behind in the long-range rifle division and the marksmanship programs, and the rest of the world's laughing at us a little bit, because although this is an excellent cartridge at 300 yards, let's face it, for as much legend and mysticism there is about the 4570 being a long-range cartridge, it's really not. It has some issues after about 500 yards. And so the government's idea was, let's get a cartridge made and a special rifle, and we can actually put on a show and challenge these British with their Martini-Henry big rifles. And the problem was basically solved by a Captain H.G. Litchfield, and he was from New York, and he trained long-range marksmen, and he got a hold of the government officials and Springfield Armory, and in February of 1879 he ordered 20 rifles. These rifles would not have the standard 1879 style rear sight on them, but would have the bull style tang flip up sight. They would also go from 3-groove rifling up to 6-groove rifling. Their receivers would also be reamed to take a slightly longer 500 grain bullet, and the request was made for a cartridge that would be 3/10 of an inch longer than the standard 4570 cartridge. This would officially be known as the 4580-500 Government, and it was made for what was known as the long-range rifles. Now then, even with this slightly longer cartridge, this cartridge would take over 1/2 inch of compression on the black powder, which is quite a bit. It was going to be tested by Captain J.E. Gear at Sandy Hook Training Grounds. Now these long-range rifles did do fairly well, and many marksmen liked them, but there was some testing that was done that found that it wasn't really necessary. The government was doing just fine with 70 grains of powder. What the real trick was, perfect longer bullet of 500 grains. They discovered that they could basically get the same group out of that long bullet and rifling with 70 grains that they could out of that same bullet combination with 80 grains. The extra 10 grains of powder just didn't make that much of a difference. Of course, this cartridge also required a unique gun, and I believe around 150 of these guns were made that were marksman's rifles, and they were used in the Creedmoor matches and did fairly well, but like I said, they discovered that they really didn't need that extra long cartridge and that extra little bit of powder. So when it came time to update the standard military rifle, what we now know as the pattern of 1884, not only did we get this excellent 500 grain bullet that had excellent ballistic coefficiency and was extremely accurate, we also got the new Buffington rear sight, which is an amazing rear sight that can be set for windage. That thing even sets at an angle so that the higher up you go and the farther range you're shooting at, the rear sight on that 1884 model trapdoor actually allows for the drift that the rifling creates. Because yes, rifling will eventually move your bullet over just a little bit with that fast twist and that very long conical bullet. But generally speaking, what was the 45-80-500 became the 45-70-500 and was adopted all the way across the military. And all military rifles except for the carbine would use the 70 grain 500, otherwise known as the 45-70-500, in all the rifles after 1884. That would go all the way up, and that would serve clear into the Spanish-American War. It took what was already a really good ballistic cartridge for military actions out to 500 yards and made it a really good ballistic cartridge for military actions out to 1,000. So that is the story of the 45-80-500. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember, trust in God, keep your powder dry. Bye.